17 minutes before Adrian Volkov was supposed to die, the girl selling flowers outside his hotel heard the sentence that sealed his fate. Elena Brooks didn't react at first. She kept arranging the white roses in her small silver bucket, fingers slightly numb from the evening air, posture calm, eyes lowered like she had trained herself to do. Outside the Aurelius Grand Hotel, invisibility was survival. Wealthy guests walked past her every day without seeing her. Luxury cars pulled up, doors opened, perfume and power drifted through revolving glass. She was background noise. At 19, Elena had perfected the art of being overlooked. Her life existed in narrow spaces, between college lectures and sunset, between counting tips and calculating rent, between grief and responsibility. 2 years ago, a wet highway and a speeding truck had erased her parents from the world. Now it was just her and her grandmother in a small apartment that always smelled faintly of tea and old books. Flowers helped pay the bills. Silence helped her endure. But silence had also taught her something dangerous. Her mother had been from St. Petersburg, soft-spoken, brilliant, careful. When Elena was little, Russian had been their secret language. Bedtime stories, whispered jokes, lullabies that sounded like falling snow. After the accident, Elena never stopped speaking it. She just stopped letting anyone know she could. It was useful to understand what people assumed you didn't, especially men with guns. The Aurelius Grand's private security often stood a few feet from her stand, black suits, earpieces, cold expressions. Sometimes, when conversations turned sensitive, they switched languages. They switched to Russian. They believed no one outside the glass doors would understand. At 5:47 p.m., one of them leaned slightly toward another and said quietly, "Когда он откроет дверь?" When he opens the door. Elena's fingers froze around a rose stem. Her heartbeat didn't spike immediately. It slowed, because tone mattered more than words. This wasn't casual conversation. It wasn't gossip. It was precise, controlled, planned. She didn't lift her head fully, just enough. Across the street, a black SUV sat idling where parking wasn't allowed. Its windows were tinted darker than regulation. The driver hadn't moved in 10 minutes. One of the guards near the entrance subtly adjusted his jacket just enough for her to glimpse the outline beneath. Not a standard sidearm, something heavier. Elena's breath turned shallow. She could walk away. It wasn't her world, not her war. Adrian Volkov had likely never noticed the girl selling flowers outside his empire of marble and glass. He represented wealth so distant it might as well have been fictional. Why risk herself? Why interfere? Her grandmother needed her. College tuition wasn't paid yet. People who stepped into the path of violence didn't get second chances. Inside the lobby, through the revolving doors, she could see movement, staff preparing, the choreography before a powerful man's exit. 16 minutes. The guard beside her spoke again in Russian, lower this time. Biz ashibok. No mistakes. That settled it. This wasn't rumor. This was execution. Elena's chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. If she stayed silent and he died, she would hear those words in her head for the rest of her life. If she spoke and was wrong, she would lose everything. 15 minutes. The SUV's headlights flickered once. Decision wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. Elena stepped away from her flower stand. For the first time in 2 years, she chose to stop being invisible, and she walked toward the revolving doors of the Aurelius Grand Hotel. By the time Elena pushed through the revolving doors of the Aurelius Grand, 14 minutes remained. The air inside felt different, warmer, filtered, expensive. Marble floors reflected chandeliers like frozen constellations. Conversations hummed softly. Luggage wheels glided across polished stone. No one looked at her twice. Until she started running. "Hey!" one of the lobby guards snapped, stepping into her path. She didn't slow down. "I need to speak to Mr. Volkov. Now!" The guard's expression hardened. "Appointments only." She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "In Russian," she said evenly, "tell him the men outside are not his men." The guard froze. For half a second, something flickered in his eyes. Confusion, calculation. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, but he answered in English. Wrong move. She switched languages. "Черный внедорожник через дорогу. Они сказали, когда он откроет дверь, и без ошибок." Black SUV across the street. They said, "when he opens the door," and "no mistakes." Now the guard's face lost color. He didn't argue again. He pressed his earpiece, spoke quickly, this time in Russian. Another guard approached, then another. The atmosphere shifted. Upstairs, on the top floor, Adrian Volkov stood in his penthouse office, staring down at the city he had reshaped with contracts and acquisitions. 35 years old, self-made, ruthless in boardrooms, precise in decisions. He trusted patterns, and he trusted his security team. When his head of security interrupted him mid-sentence, that alone was unusual. "There's a girl downstairs," the man said carefully. "She claims there's a threat. She repeated something only our internal team discussed." Adrian didn't turn immediately. "What exactly did she repeat?" The guard hesitated. "When he opens the door." Silence stretched. That phrase had been used in a restricted internal briefing weeks ago, contingency planning language, not public, not shared beyond a tight circle. Adrian finally turned. "Bring her up." 8 minutes remained. The private elevator ride felt longer than it was. Elena's reflection in the mirrored walls looked smaller than she felt. Her hands trembled slightly now that she wasn't outside anymore. What was she doing? If she was wrong? The elevator doors opened. The penthouse office was vast, floor-to-ceiling windows, dark wood, city skyline burning gold with sunset. And Adrian Volkov. He studied her the way a strategist studies a new variable. "You sell flowers," he said calmly. "Yes. And you claim my security is compromised." "Yes." He walked closer, slow and controlled. "Explain." She inhaled carefully. "At 5:47 p.m., 2 of your guards switched to Russian. One said, 'when he opens the door.' The other responded, 'no mistakes.' There's a black SUV across the street. The driver hasn't moved in over 15 minutes. One of your men near the entrance adjusted his jacket to reveal a larger firearm than standard issue." The room went completely still. Adrian didn't look at her anymore. He looked at his security head. "In Russian," Adrian said quietly, "ask Sergei what he meant." The head of security relayed the question through his earpiece. Static. No response. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. 7 minutes. "Lock down the lobby. No one exits." Commands flew instantly. Monitors lit up. Camera feeds zoomed in on the street. The SUV. As if sensing exposure, its engine revved. One of the guards near the entrance stepped backwards subtly toward the curb instead of the hotel doors. Not protecting, positioning. Adrian's voice dropped colder than before. "Detain him." 2 loyal guards moved swiftly. The man near the entrance reacted too late. His hand darted inside his jacket. A gun flashed. A shot rang out, not toward Adrian, but toward the glass doors. Chaos erupted below. Guests screamed. Security tackled the traitor before he could fire again. Outside, the SUV sped off, tires shrieking. Inside the penthouse, the monitor showed everything. The plan had been real, precise, timed to the second. Adrian looked back at Elena. 3 minutes remained until his usual exit time. You just altered the outcome of this evening. Her pulse pounded in her ears. I almost didn't come in, she admitted quietly. He studied her longer now, not as background, not as noise, as risk, as intelligence. You understood Russian, he said. My mother taught me. And you were certain enough to gamble your safety. She didn't answer immediately. No, she finally said. I was certain enough to regret staying silent. That earned the faintest shift in his expression, not quite a smile, recognition. Downstairs, the situation stabilized, the traitor restrained, police en route. The clock struck 6:04 p.m., the minute he was supposed to die. Adrian turned back to the skyline. You heard what trained professionals missed, he said without looking at her. That makes you either very lucky or very perceptive. He faced her again. I don't believe in luck. Silence hung between them. Then, tomorrow, Adrian Volkov said, you won't be selling flowers outside my hotel. Elena's breath caught. You'll be working inside it. And for the first time since her parents died, her life shifted direction. Elena did not return to the sidewalk the next morning. Her silver bucket of roses remained in her apartment, placed carefully near the window. For the first time in 2 years, she walked toward the Aurelius Grand through the front entrance, not as background, but as someone expected. Adrian Volkov did not offer charity. He offered proximity. Officially, Elena was brought in as a junior operations assistant, temporary, discreet. Unofficially, she was placed where information moved fastest: executive coordination, contracts, international calls, private security briefings. She listened. That was always her strength. Within weeks, she noticed something most executives overlooked. Power rarely announced itself loudly. It hid in phrasing, in pauses, in translations. Adrian began testing her. He would slide documents across the desk without explanation. "What do you see?" he would ask. At first, she saw numbers. Then she began seeing intent. One evening, nearly 2 months after the failed assassination, a high-stakes partnership proposal arrived from an overseas investment group. On the surface, it was flawless, profitable, strategic, safe. The board was ready to sign. Elena wasn't. Buried deep in a secondary clause, written in formal Russian legal structure, was a conditional trigger. If activated under specific market pressure, control of several hotel assets would quietly transfer to the investment group. It wasn't illegal, it was predatory and almost invisible. She reread it 3 times before walking into Adrian's office. "You need to delay the signing," she said calmly. The room went silent. Executives shifted uncomfortably. Adrian leaned back in his chair. "Explain." She pointed to the clause, translated it precisely, broke down its implications step by step. When she finished, even the senior legal advisor looked unsettled. The deal was paused. An independent review confirmed her interpretation. If signed, the Aurelius Grand would have lost millions and long-term leverage. That night, Adrian stood beside the same penthouse window where she had first warned him. "The first time you saved my life," he said quietly, "it was physical." He turned toward her. This time, it was strategic. Elena didn't respond immediately. She remembered the cold pavement outside, the way guests used to walk past her, the way invisibility once felt like protection. Now she understood something different. Visibility was responsibility. Weeks later, the hotel's internal restructuring placed her officially within executive intelligence coordination, Not because of sympathy, because she had earned it. Security protocols changed after the betrayal. Language barriers were no longer underestimated. Patterns were no longer assumed harmless. Adrian's empire grew, but more carefully now. And Elena? She no longer stood outside glass doors, watching power move without her. She sat at the table where it was shaped. One evening, as the city lights flickered below, Adrian asked her a question. "When you heard those words that night, why didn't you walk away?" She thought about it. "Because silence would have followed me longer than fear," she answered. He nodded once. Respect, not spoken, but understood. The girl no one noticed had become the person no one ignored. And the most dangerous thing in a room full of powerful men was no longer a weapon. It was the one person who listened carefully enough to hear what others tried to hide. If you loved Elena's story, subscribe to Move to Hope and hit the bell. Would you risk everything to save someone you barely know? Comment below. I read every answer. See you in the next story.